One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. But I hate the sound of my voice. Those are usually the first words new podcasters tell me. Their confidence is shaken. They think they don't have what it takes. Their mind has misled them to believe they should be amazing the first time they sit down in front of the mic. You thought you were supposed to be good right out of the gate? Oh no, we're all terrible in the beginning. And guess what? You can't change the sound of your voice. So let's fill it with confidence instead. This book is meant to educate, inspire, and encourage you. I don't have some fancy degree in podcasting magic. I can't make you sound like you're in $1 million studio when you're really recording in your closet, surrounded by piles of laundry. But I can teach you how to create content your audience craves every week. I can teach you how to sit at your mic with your head held high because you know you're talking to the exact person you want to reach. You're delivering valuable content, and you're not agonizing over all the stupid editing. Can we stop losing sleep over the editing? I'm not saying podcasting is easy. It takes a lot of work, planning, learning from mistakes, being vulnerable, and trying to improve every day. But with the things I'll teach you in this book, at least you'll have a lot of fun every step of the way. So let's get started. Okay, guys, that was the cover of my brand new book, Start a Binge-Worthy Podcast, a step-by-step guide to creating a podcast your audience craves. And it's actually on pre-order right now on Amazon. So go to thebestpodcastbook.com to order your copy of Start a Binge-Worthy Podcast. Again, that's thebestpodcastbook.com. It will be available on October 20th, 2020, and I cannot wait to see what you think of this brand new project, so go grab it, thebestpodcastbook.com. Grab your copy today. Okay, so I feel like lately I've been starting the podcast with like a behind the scenes tip, trick, strategy, or something of that nature. So today I wanted to share with you my strategy that I didn't do a lot of interviews for my podcast over the summer. Now, granted, 2020 has been a beast of its own in trying to figure out schedules and understand, what's going on when and where and all the things. But typically I guess it was last year in 2019, I kind of just drew a line in the sand and said, you know what? I don't want to do interviews over the summer whenever I have the kids at home and, if we wanted to go somewhere and take a trip, which we didn't really do a lot of that this year, but I decided to not plan a lot of interviews over the summertime. And I wanted to share that with you simply because a lot of the interviews that you're going to hear over the next few weeks, I recently did those. It's not like I've been hanging on to these since March or April earlier this year. I really wanted to take the summer off. And so I just recently started kind of ramping back up and interviewing other people to be on this podcast and bring you their stories, their expertise, and their resources. So, without further ado, I cannot wait to tell you about today's guest. So, let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of podcasting, think of this show as the time-saving shortcut you've been looking for. So let's get right to it, shall we? So today's guest, I'm so happy to have chatted with Monica and just learned so much about her. We have so many things in common. She has literally written the book on being a boy mom, and you're going to hear more about that later. But if you didn't already know this, I have 3 boys. Right now, they are ages 11, 8, and 4. And Monica has 4 boys. So we talked all about being a boy mom and what that entails. And we also talked about her podcasting journey. That's what I really want to focus on. We uncovered little gems and nuggets of wisdom that I didn't even know we were going to hit on. But as they came up, I made sure and asked those questions that I knew podcasters who were either just getting started on their journey or they were trying to figure out their topic, what they really wanted to talk about. The conversation was just so good. But let me tell you a little bit about Monica. So Monica Swanson is the author of the book, Boy Mom, and she's the podcast host of the Boy Mom podcast. She lives in Hawaii, where she and her husband are raising and homeschooling their 4 sons. And we get into a little bit about her home life and what that looks like, having boys at home, what it's been like in quarantine, and all the things. So here's my interview with Monica. All right, Profit Podcast listeners, I'm so excited to have another boy mom on the show today. So welcome to the show, Monica.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so like I told everybody in the introduction, I let them know a little bit about your podcast and your journey, but can you fill us in on the details about how you became a podcaster and what that journey has looked like for you?
You bet. So I've been blogging it'll be 10 years this winter, and just kind of followed that course, love writing, love sharing my heart, being on social media and all of that. But once I started listening to podcasts, I started to have that little dream in the back of my head, but it just sounded so scary and overwhelming that I was like, there's no way. I'm a writer. I'm not a podcaster. But it just kept coming up. And the more I listened, the more I was like, I want to do it. I want to do it. And then finally, my book, Boy Mom, released in August of 2019. And so in the months leading up to it, I was like, you know what? I think I need to do it. Even if it's just, I gave myself permission. I thought, even if it's just a few months during the book launch, I just got to get it out there and see how I like it. Well, I started the podcast in June of that summer. So before the book launched, and almost immediately, I was like, yeah, I want to do this long term. This is not a short term thing. I realized it was not as bad as I thought it would be. It wasn't as hard. There's a learning curve. I'm still learning, but that's kind of how it was born. And I'm just loving it now.
That's so awesome. So was your blogging audience, did they kind of transition over to your podcast, or was it a totally different topic that you were covering on your blog?
Yeah, great question. Well, I try to keep the blog up, but the truth is I think there's so many more people listening to podcasts now than reading blogs. And so because my blog is really more of a general, it's a lifestyle blog. I focus a lot on family and parenting, and I share like some recipes. I live here in Hawaii, so I like to share, some of our lifestyle here. I've got surfer boys and all that, but the podcast is the Boy Mom podcast. So that's a little more niche. And so with that in mind, I keep coming back to the blog to share more. I don't want to leave those people. I've got, girl moms or people who aren't parents at all. So I try to keep serving them as well. But certainly over time, it's shifted to be more and more the podcast. And I think most of my podcast listeners originally moved over from the blog. And now as word gets out, it's just starting to grow its own little community.
That's
So it's a mix.
awesome. Yes. No, but
Yeah.
I love that you took, your passion and you were just
Mhm.
like, okay, like I love this blogging thing, but I
Mhm.
know like the
Mhm.
podcast is kind of the direction that you tried it out. And so
Yeah.
give me like your initial thought process. Like whenever you first hit publish on your podcast, were you just saying, okay, if this doesn't work, I can always go
I
back to
could al
blogging,
Yeah.
or what were your thoughts?
Definitely, definitely. I gave myself a lot of permission to just like, this is an experiment. And yeah, I think that just kind of figuring out what my voice was going to be, because it's different being a writer than a podcaster. And I didn't have the confidence yet that it's something I could do. And so I think it just took really that whole process of stepping out and just doing it scared and knowing that. I mean, in the very first episode, I remember saying, well, you have to be bad at something before you're good at it. So here I go. Like, I just totally went out humbly saying, guys, I don't know what I'm doing, but hang in there with me. Maybe we're going to get somewhere.
Oh, I love it. And now, so
Mhm.
you've been doing it for more than a year now?
Yeah. Just
That's
over a year.
awesome. That's so
Yeah.
awesome. So
Mhm.
tell me, how did you land on the concept of being a boy mom? Because we absolutely
Mhm.
share this. We were talking about
Mhm.
this earlier. You have 4 boys. I have
Yeah.
3 boys. So there's a lot of
Right.
testosterone that we're surrounded by all the time.
That's
So
it.
how did you decide that that's where you wanted to go all in for your podcast?
Right. Great question. Because even though I chose to write my book, titled Boy Mom, initially I was imagining the podcast would be the Monica Swanson podcast. I just thought, well, you know what? I don't just want to talk about boys. But as I got closer and closer, I started to realize that it would make sense to narrow that focus, and that there's so many parenting podcasts out there, and that's not bad. I listen to some general parenting podcasts myself, but I thought, what if I really did narrow down on that topic of boys? And what's cool is, even though I say narrow, there's so much, I could spend years talking about boys and never run out of topics. And I think
Right.
that's true, whatever your focus is. I think that there's so much to say on any given topic that even though it's scary sometimes to narrow down, I think it's usually a really good idea. So I decided to go with the boy mom topic. And, I've thought in time, depending on future books and future projects, that maybe it would morph into something different. But now I have the confidence that that's okay too.
Oh, that's so awesome. So I want to really just hone in on what you just said. So
Mm.
you said, like, you're like, okay, if this doesn't work, I can always go back to blogging, right? You're
Hmm.
giving yourself lots of grace,
Hmm.
but you've also fallen in love with the audience and the topic
Hmm.
that you're talking about.
Yeah.
But you knew from the beginning, if this doesn't work, we'll figure it out along the way.
Yes,
So
definitely. Definitely. Yeah. And I think too that once you're in a topic like that, once I narrowed it down, it's almost like, I wish I had a good analogy for it, but like you get narrow, but then within that narrow field, there's just so many unique little intricacies that you can cover. And it makes it so much more interesting, because you're not trying to cover this broad topic every week, but we're actually getting really specific about things that have to do with moms and boys, which there's a lot to say there. So it's really fun.
oh, that's so awesome. And I love this part of the story because my listeners, they are on so many different ends of being a
Hmm.
podcaster. They're either thinking about doing it, they're just in the planning and creation stages, or they've been podcasting for a while, but maybe they haven't had the results that they've wanted. So I love hearing the behind the scenes,
Hmm.
but I want to change gears for a second
Mhm.
because I was listening to your podcast and I heard your son has a podcast now. So tell me about that. How did that happen?
Yeah, it's so fun. I mean, I think that's one thing that I love to encourage moms with is when you're doing, you're raising a family and mom's doing things and trying new things and being brave. It actually really does affect the kids. So when my oldest son, who's now 21, was a senior in high school, he's always loved writing, but I was working on my first published book, and by the end of his senior year, he had self-published a book and put it on
Wow.
Amazon. Like he wrote a story and I was like, wow, I don't want to take credit, but maybe, maybe some of that has, and then here I start this podcast. And next thing you know, my second son, who has been, he listens to podcasts all the time. He's super smart and he's got interest beyond what I talk about. But he started going, Mom, I think I want to start a podcast. I was like, this is so cool. I just, I could imagine that maybe with a daughter, but for me to see my sons kind of walking in my footsteps, they have tons of respect for their dad. They learn tons from him. But I love to think that what I'm doing really does kind of encourage and inspire my sons as well.
Oh, that's so incredible. Absolutely. I think that the inspiration is like just kind of bubbling around your house. Like
Oh,
that's what I
yeah,
imagine. Like it's like, oh,
totally.
okay, anything is possible. Like that's what
Yes.
I imagine your
Mhm.
children, because that's how it's been for my sons. They love
Mhm.
coming in and like playing with my ring light in the office and my microphone on the stand and everything. And they're like, what do you actually do in here? And they kind of look
Totally.
around because how old is your son that has a podcast?
He just turned 19.
Just turned 19. So
Yeah.
that's so incredible because,
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know what technology is going to be like in the next few years, but
Mhm.
to have this grounds of, you know what, I'm just going to try it and see what
Totally.
happens. Like
Yeah.
that's so inspiring. So I
Thank
love
you.
that story. I wanted to know all about it.
Thank you. Yeah, and just what you said is true. I mean, I think that I get so excited about my work and I'm so passionate that I'm always like, what do you guys think of this? What do you think? I'm always like running ideas by them, and I do think it's contagious. So whatever we do as parents, I think the more we can show and bring our kids into it, the more they catch that inspiration as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's so fun. Oh my
Thank
gosh.
you.
I love it. I just love this idea because I've had my kids say, well, especially during quarantine and everything that's happened
Mhm.
this year, they're like, I kind of want to start a YouTube channel, or maybe I could
Mhm.
start a podcast. Whereas some people who aren't kind of absorbed in the online world as we are, they would say, that's crazy. You shouldn't do
Mhm.
that. But I'm like, yeah, go get something. Yeah, figure it
Totally.
out. Like let's do
Absolutely.
this. Like what do we need to do to make this happen? So that's so
Yes.
fun.
And I'll be honest, when my son first brought it up, I was like, oh boy, like you give a 19-year-old a microphone and I have my own platform I've built, right? So there was a little part of me that was like, oh dear, this could, what's he going to do? Like, I'm kind of
Exactly.
putting myself out there and I don't know what, I mean, I love his heart. He's a great kid, but still you're like, especially because I tell my listeners about it because my listeners have kids who can listen to my son's podcast. I was like, buddy, you have to know that, like, if I'm sharing this, then you have to at least let me have some say in what you're doing. Cause I didn't want to just give them full freedom to
Yeah.
just run with it and do something crazy. So yeah, there's a little nerves involved in that process, but it's a good thing.
Right. It's like that cringe moment. You're like, is it just going to be all fart jokes, or like what's actually going to happen
Exactly.
here?
Exactly.
We
Yeah.
totally see eye to eye, like
Yes,
total
we do.
boy mom
Yep.
dialogue going on
Yep.
here. But
Yes.
so I want to switch gears real fast and go back to you choosing the boy mom niche,
Mhm.
because that, I mean, obviously it's been super successful for you. I love to
Mhm.
see, especially women as podcasters, because I feel like there's this big wave of confidence that's really just going, it's kind of just going haywire. And I know maybe
Mhm.
it's just because I'm totally absorbed in the podcasting world, but I love to see that women are being inspired and
Mhm.
inspiring and
Mhm.
motivating. But for the boy mom, this is what
Mhm.
you chose as opposed to just parenting.
Mhm.
How has that helped you stand out? Like, do you feel
Mhm.
more confident behind the
Mhm.
microphone choosing this super niche topic as opposed to a more general one?
Yeah, I think I do. I think that because I did try to do some research and there's always going to be other podcasts out there, other topics, but I didn't see anybody doing exactly what I wanted to do. Even if the name of it or if it, might have appeared at first to be covering the same topics. I knew that my voice and my heart, and I think some of that came from the years of writing and social media, that I kind of knew what I had to offer. So again, there's that whole, just sometimes you have to be confident in something you don't see yet. And, there's a faith element there. I don't like to say the whole fake it till you make it, but kind of like, I'm going to walk into this as the boy mom. This is who I am. And so I'm just going to own it. And yeah, with that, I think it's been fun because when I bring people on, I almost feel like it helps my guests as well, because sometimes a guest will come on a general podcast and it's like, okay, now I have to know everything about everything. But it's like, no, we're actually just going to talk about anxiety in boys or reading in boys or whatever your topic is in boys. And so I think it helps the guests as well be really prepared for our conversations. And then when people listen, they kind of know what they're going to get, that we're going to talk about boys. Yeah, most of the topics do spill over. If you've got a daughter, I hear from people all the time. They're like, oh, this helped me with my daughter too. I'm like, well, good. But I do think it helps me plan, prepare, and produce the podcast because of the more narrow niche.
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that putting that stake in the ground, I've told listeners before, and this has probably happened to you as well, where you get someone pitch you, they're like, hey, I want to come talk on your podcast. And it's very general or it's very confusing because of, you're like, well, that's awesome. Either I think your product is fantastic or your book or your event or whatever you're trying to promote, but we just talked to this, like this one topic. This is our lane. This is where we're going to stay. So for me, and I don't know if you're a people pleaser, I am a little bit.
Yeah.
And a lot of my audiences, and they're like, I don't want to say no to someone. And have you felt that putting that stake in the ground, that this is who we're talking to, if you have one of those awkward pitches come through, it's a lot easier to say no or to say yes.
Yes, absolutely. I do. Because and a lot of people that are pitching, and maybe this is good advice for those out there who pitch themselves to other podcasters, but they'll say, well, I can talk about these 5 topics. And I'm like, you basically covered everything. And if you're trying to tell me you're an expert in everything, then I don't know if you really, so I really appreciate it when somebody has done the research and they know that I talk about boys and they know my worldview and they know kind of my heart, and they're able to say, hey, I have something to share about, boys and nutrition, whatever it might be. But if they use that word boy, if they know what I'm talking to, I'm going to be a lot more likely to say, yeah, why don't you come on? I think that sounds like that would really serve my listeners.
For sure. And I think you probably have a more authentic conversation. I've had some forced interviews before that make it very uncomfortable.
Yeah, me too. I'm learning as I go.
Yeah, but I think that it's so point to really hit on that. So if anybody's listening and, from what Monica just said, it's like, look, if you have that stake in the ground, you know what you're talking about, and someone pitches you a topic that's way out of left field, and you're just like, I don't feel like this aligns. You got to go with that gut feeling. Yeah. Because I don't know about you, whenever you've had conversations, but most of the time my gut steers me in the right direction.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm with you.
Well, I want to ask you, so it's been such a crazy year for everybody. And I know we were talking earlier that we're using Squadcast right now to record this interview. And so much has changed in podcasting technology just in 2020. So I wanted to ask, with your podcast, has anything changed, or have you used a different type of equipment that you're in love with? Tell us about some of the behind the scenes of your show.
Yes. Well, I'm the most untechy person you'll meet. And so I always say it's kind of a miracle that I do what I do. And thank God for teenage boys who are home, and my oldest son who's studying computer science and data analytics in college, because I'm constantly needing help.
That's amazing.
But yes, I actually used Skype for my first year for interviews. And I thought it was okay, but at some point I started to have enough issues. Excuse me. And so I just recently started using Squadcast as well. And my son, who started his podcast, is the one who did all the research. He's like, Mom, I think Squadcast is the way to go. So I've been really happy with that. And otherwise, I've tried a number of microphones, never really high-end expensive ones, but I've had a couple, kids play with them and they break and things happen. So otherwise, I've tried to keep it really simple. I've known that, if I complicate things, I'm not as likely to keep it up. So I keep it real simple and just kind of doing what I need to do and nothing more as far as technology goes.
No, that's awesome. And I think that that's fantastic. Like keeping it simple is, and like you said, yourself, that you can overcomplicate things or make it too hard when it doesn't need to be. And I think that that's so important to just keep it very simple. And then you avoid that overwhelm of technology or too many steps. I know a lot of people try to throw in extra steps and you're just like, oh my gosh, I quit because I can't do it. It's too complicated.
Exactly. Yep. And I've thought about trying to do record my interviews and put them on YouTube. And that's something I always think, people do talk about video. I don't know about you and how you feel about video, but I, at this point, have told myself, I think that would be one step too many, but maybe that's in the future too. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, from a personal standpoint, I love being able to show up, which I'm going to applaud myself for a second because I feel kind of put together today. But most of the time when I'm recording, I got my hair up in a crazy bun. I got on some shorts and a tank top. And I'm like, I do not want to be on video, but I'm going to do it today because I have an interview.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So, and I think that that's probably us as women, maybe not all guys do that. I see most guys, doing a YouTube video in a t-shirt and I'm sure they feel fantastic, but there's only so many tank tops that I have look exactly alike. I'm like, I feel like I would need to spruce it up a little bit if I was on video all the time.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm with you.
Well, I want to ask because you have a book, you have your podcast. So how do you promote your book on your podcast? I know people that are starting to kind of tiptoe into creating a digital course or doing a book or something addition to their podcast. How has that worked out for you? Do you promote that on your show or how do you feel about that?
Yeah. It's been a pretty natural process. I haven't had to overthink it too much because I guess we've got the intros and outros, whatever topic I'm on. I just kind of give myself freedom in the opening usually to just touch bases with my listeners. I love that, to just check in, talk about, couple minutes about, asking for ratings and reviews. That's one thing I pretty much always do. And I think that's really helped. If I've got something I'm sharing on my blog, I'll mention that. I've announced my son's podcast. So I kind of figure this is my podcast. I get to do what I want. And so, yes, with the book, I bring it up. It's funny. I go weeks sometimes and realize I haven't mentioned it. And I'm like, wait, the whole idea of this podcast is it's pointing to my book. And I forget to tell people because I assume everyone knows. So yeah, every once in a while, I'll remind myself to mention it. And then I just did produce my first course this summer. And so that's been fun to share with my podcast listeners. So yeah, it's just been a great platform all around.
That's so awesome. And do you feel like it's been easier to talk about a podcast as opposed to your blog? I'm always curious to how different people react to, okay, you have this written form of content, but then you have this audio. Like, how has that really worked for you in being able to talk about it?
Yeah. Again, I guess I'm pretty conversational in my style. So it's been pretty natural depending on what's going on. I did a series in the new year for moms, really focusing on what moms need most, which kind of was good timing during, not that many people were doing much of anything this spring, but there, at least as far as like taking care of yourself and what do you need so that you can give everyone else what they need. And so that was a pretty natural mention on the podcast. So I feel like everything I do, and one thing I learned years ago, and I'm trying to remember who I learned this from. Maybe it was like Michael Hyatt way back in the day, but I remember him saying, because I was trying to figure out how much I needed to niche in on my blog, even like how narrow do I need this to be? And I loved his advice that people will follow you often. And again, there's certain topics that are very specific to a profession or a career. But he said, if you have a worldview that people agree with, like, then you can talk about a number of things. You don't want to go and talk about 20 things, but you can have a handful of topics that people will follow and listen to, and you can't really go wrong. And so I think that gave me some permission to like do a full series on encouraging just the moms, self-care and the mom life, but also talk about raising boys. And then, health and nutrition is a big part of my life. And that's one thing I'll give myself permission to talk about. So I think it's been pretty natural to bring up the things that I'm focused on at that moment and figure, hey, if somebody's not into that this week, hopefully they'll come back next week and I'll probably talk about something they are interested in.
No, I love that you already said this once, but I say this all the time when people ask me about formats and music and different things on my podcast. I say, I kind of do what I want because it's my show. And I love that you said that because, and where does that come from? Like, have you always had that, like, kind of instinctively in your blogging journey? Or like, is that just who you are as a person? You're like, I'm just going to do it. And then if it doesn't work, I'll try something else.
Yeah. I often say I'm not a perfectionist, which is, in some ways works against me because sometimes I, don't do perfect work and it might get a little sloppy. But the upside to that is that I give myself a lot of freedom to have fun with things and to try them. And if it doesn't work, I have grace for myself. So I think it's just my style. From the beginning of my blog, I've been very conversational. I love to talk to readers like they're my friend having coffee with me. And I think I have the same style on the podcast. So, yeah.
That's great. I think that's the best way to be too, is when you can get that narrow focus, like you niche down and you know exactly who you're talking to, everything just gets easier. I feel like
100%. Yeah. And really, I do look at people like they're my friends because I'm just like them. I mean, I'm just another mom out there trying to figure things out. And I'm not trying to be an expert. I'm not trying to, be up on some pedestal. I'm just talking to them like we are having coffee. And I think when it's authentic, when you really do care about people and when you know that you're not all that, then it levels a playing field and it's just such a more fun conversation.
Oh, I agree. 100%. 100%. That's actually,
I see that
feel
in
like
you
we
too.
are absolutely on like the same wavelength on that. There's so many things in common.
We do.
But since you've been podcasting for a year, and I know we have a lot of people that are listening and they're like, well, that's fantastic that Monica has figured all of these things out, but maybe they're a little confused still. What advice would you give to someone who is just now starting, they're in the creation mode, they haven't launched, and if you could see yourself back a year ago and give yourself some advice, what would that be?
Yeah. I think that whatever it is you're trying to do in the world of online, creation, whether you're writing or podcasting, my biggest advice is really to start simple and be consistent. And I think consistency is like the key to life. Like you name it, whatever topic, if you can do a little bit, but keep doing it, don't try to do everything this week because you're going to burn out and give up, but do a little bit and don't let yourself give up because you can only grow. You can only get better. So I just encourage people to get started. Social media, whether you like it or hate it, it's kind of part of the deal. And you really need to be in there and you need to stay active and you're rewarded when you do. I mean, I go times where I kind of start to get slack and I'm like, it actually really pays off to be present. But again, you don't have to be online all day long, but choose a time, choose a commitment, and then stick with that. So yeah, I think consistency and not trying to do too much, just take it easy and then keep it up and be patient.
That's awesome. Well, so I want to go back to real fast because you mentioned social media. So have you been able to learn more about your audience through social media? Like, do you have a community online or do you have like a Facebook group? Tell me about your community on social media.
Right. Yeah. Again, I've kept things pretty simple. I mean, I've had my business Facebook page since pretty early on in my blog career, and I continue to kind of serve them like I always have, just staying in there, once or twice a day. I don't schedule a bunch of posts and try to rule the Facebook world, but I'm just touching bases. I'll throw out a question, which people love, and I get a lot of responses. I do share anytime I have a new podcast or a new post. My Instagrams all go onto Facebook. So, Facebook is kind of, and I just feel like, I'm turning 50 this year. And I think people in my age range are kind of still on Facebook, but I know the younger people are not so much. So Instagram's really where my focus is. And my Instagram crew, it's complicated. I think those people that love studying data analytics and love to get in there and check out all the information, there's a lot you can learn. I just don't have that kind of time. I'm homeschooling kids. I'm a busy mom. So I wish I knew more. I should have my son who studies this stuff dig in for me. But all of that to say, my vibe is people like to see the real you. They like to see you being authentic. I try to share more thoughtful Instagram posts with a longer caption occasionally, just to really kind of share what you would find in my book or in my, my writing. But also in between that, just fun stuff. I try to share stories, what's going on in our real life. But then again, sneak in there when I have a new podcast episode. So it's kind of that balance of like real life, fun, authentic living, but also here's what I'm doing if you want to be a part of it. Because I do find that if I post just that image of a podcast episode on Instagram, it will not get a lot of likes. It does not get much. But if I show the same photo, but without the whole podcast image and just share a caption, it's funny. I don't know if people are just resistant. If it's like, I follow you because I like your lifestyle. I don't want to be, I don't want you to push your podcast on me. I'm like, I'm always trying to figure that out. But for now, I just try to walk the fine line and do my best and figure, hey, if you quit following me because you don't want to hear about my podcast, you probably don't belong in my community anyway. So go ahead. There's plenty of others out there.
Well, so what I'm hearing you say is you got to still be authentic. And it sounds like to me that you've just taken the ideas from being a lifestyle blogger and you apply it to being a lifestyle podcaster where your podcast may be super niche, but on your social media platforms, you're still sharing about your life and your lifestyle.
Exactly.
But just in an authentic way. And I think that that's fantastic.
Yeah, that you just said it perfectly. And it's something I've talked to my boys about because each of my boys are kind of doing their own things, from writing. And my oldest son also has a pretty good Instagram following, and he shares a lot of thoughtful posts. And then the podcaster. And then my third son is actually a young professional surfer. So he has a big following and travels the world and has sponsors and all that. But he also uses his voice to really encourage young people he's got a really powerful voice. So we're always talking about this stuff. And we've all agreed that, you know what? People want to see the real you. And I really believe that. And I think so many people are like, yeah, but I'm a dork, but I'm not funny, but I'm not cool. But I'm like, seriously, there's enough people in the world. There's going to be people who like you. They're going to like your voice.
Yes.
You don't have to be funny. You don't have to be smart. Just be you, because I do believe God created each of us with special gifts and talents. And if you just are you, it's going to take away so much of the stress, so much of that pressure when you're trying to be someone you're not. Just give it up already. I say, just be who you are. Yes, do your work, do your research, serve your audience. But in the meantime, keep being you, because there's going to be people out there who really want to see the real you. So that's my best advice.
That was a mic drop moment. That was so good. That was so good. And I really feel like somebody listening needed to hear that today because maybe they're struggling to really just get going, or maybe they're frustrated, overwhelmed, or they're just feeling that kind of imposter syndrome set in. So I think that you really just spoke to someone today. So thank you so much for that. Oh my gosh, Monica, this has been such a fantastic interview, but I want to switch gears real fast. Are you up for some rapid fire questions?
Oh, I'm terrible at these, but
you're going to be great. I promise. You're going to be great. I didn't make them too hard. I didn't make them too hard.
I'll do my best.
Well, you kind of answered this one earlier, but I'm going to rephrase it just a little bit. What advice would you give to a brand new podcaster that's about to launch?
Okay, I'm going to say I'm going back in time here. Rapid fire, and she's taking her time. Sorry. Well, I mean, do you want like the practical stuff? Like, I mean, most people know this, but I learned and I'll go ahead and shout out a couple things I've learned from. I took Pat Flynn's Power Up podcasting course before I ever launched. And so, yeah, I think it really helped to have a few ready to go. So I think I launched 3 or 4 all at once. And so I think that's great advice. My son did that, and that really helped kind of get him started. Other practical advice, get word out. Make sure you're telling people about it before you hit that first launch, before you release that first episode. Put yourself out there, get over your insecurity, and just tell everyone you know, because people will check it out when you first get started. And I think they're more likely to check it out when you first get started even than later. So you want to start strong. So get word out. Don't hide what you're doing.
Oh, that's perfect. That's perfect. Okay. So this next question is a 2-part question because you have a podcast. So the first one is who would be your dream podcast guest? And then whose podcast would you love to be on?
Wow. Dream podcast guest. Oh, that's a good. Let's see. Well, since I have the Boy Mom podcast, I love to learn from other moms of boys, and somebody that I would love to talk to. My boys all follow Tim Tebow, if you know Tim Tebow.
Yeah.
And I just love to learn from moms of people who are still doing their thing right now. So I'd love to have Tim Tebow's mom on sometime. I think that's somebody I've thought about. I haven't even actually reached out to her yet. So that's just one that popped in my head because we were talking about Tim Tebow.
And we're putting it out there in the universe, right? It's out there now.
Somebody like that. Or, if I could go back in history, I would interview the mom of some great man of history. But we'll just say I'd love to have Mrs. Tebow on. And whose podcast would I love to be on? Oh, goodness. Well, I was just telling you that I'm also a fan of Amy Porterfield. And I have just launched my first digital course that I took her digital course creation course. That's always such a mouthful. But yeah, I'd love to share my story about my digital course. Pat Flynn is another one. I've followed both of them for years. So to share that I've actually put into practice everything I've learned from those guys, and it's going quite well. So yeah.
That's awesome. Those are fantastic ones. And if you're listening and you've never heard of them, oh my gosh, you have to go listen to their podcast and go follow them immediately, because I agree, they have taught me so much as well. Okay. So the last question that I have, and you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but do you consider yourself a perfectionist?
No, I don't. I'm a B+ happy camper. Just get it done, get it out there, and move on. And I don't know if you speak Enneagram around here, but I'm an Enneagram 3, and that just means I'm always doing the next thing. So sadly, sometimes I don't enjoy what I just did because it's like, okay, good enough. Now move on. And I'm like, I could probably go back and make it better. No, just go on to the next thing.
Oh my gosh, we're like 2 peas in a pod. I'm an Enneagram 3 as well. So this is so funny.
We need to have coffee one day.
Oh my gosh, Monica, this is so awesome. So tell everybody where they can find you on social media. And like you mentioned, you have a course coming up soon and you have a book. So tell us all the things and all the places where everybody can find you.
Alrighty. Well, my home base is, you can find everything at monicaswanson.com. And I do have the Boy Mom podcast. On Instagram, I'm also at monicaswanson_. So yeah, that's kind of all the home base spots. The Boy Mom podcast, my book is called Boy Mom. If you've got boys, it's that book is for you. And I did just release the beta group for my character training course. So whether you have boys or girls, if you're a parent of any age child, the character training course will be coming out this fall. And I'm really excited about that. And again, information for all those things are at my website. Thanks.
Oh, Monica, this was so awesome. And because you're in Hawaii, I just feel it's very fitting to say aloha and thank you so much for being on the show today.
Aloha and thank you. Let's stay in touch.
So what did you think? Did you really enjoy hearing the behind the scenes of Monica's journey? Because I know I did. I love, of course, hello, here's the geekiest person about podcasting. Of course, I loved hearing about Monica's journey, but I hope that you took bits and pieces of her story and you can apply that to your own journey. Monica didn't have all the answers all the time as her podcast journey really unfolded, but she figured it out along the way, and I know that you can too. So if you're interested in learning more about Monica and her resources, go grab her book, all the things, then go to crystalprofit.com/episode 190 to learn about how you can connect with her and learn more about Monica. But that's all I have for you today. So like I said, check out the show notes, crystalprofit.com/episode 190. And remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.